Hi, I'm Konrad Marshall, and from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, welcome to Season 6 of Good Weekend Talks, a magazine for your ears featuring in-depth conversations with fascinating people from sport and politics, science and culture, business and beyond. Every week you can download new episodes in which top journalists from across our newsrooms talk to compelling people about the definitive stories of the day. In this episode, we speak with Callum Linnane, the principal dancer for the Australian Ballet. Linnane, 29, has been dancing since he was first enrolled in tap lessons as a 7-year-old in regional Victoria. Now he's the star of the show, the kind of person who does magazine spreads and launches spring fashion campaigns. His social media followers have described him as everything from Australia's answer to Rudolf Nureyev to a young David Bowie. But really, he's just a boy from Ballarat who's made it big on the stage and is about to play the titular role in Nijinsky, the latest offering from the Australian Ballet. Welcome, Callum.
Wow, what an intro. Thanks for having me.
Like that?
That was great.
We're rapt to have you here. Now, I've been to the ballet a few times, but I'm no expert, and I suspect many of our listeners probably fall into that same boat. So first of all, what does it mean to be the principal artist beyond kind of the car parking space and the Qantas Club membership?
Oh my gosh, you have done your research. Well, yeah, they're the best perks. Well, I mean, it's probably, I need to try and describe it like separate to my own dreams and what it meant to me because, you know, it's all I wanted to be ever since I was 13. But you join a ballet company or most ballet companies in everything separated into ranks. So you join usually as an 18, 19-year-old in the quarter ballet. The Australian Ballet has 5 ranks. Most ballet companies kind of have around the same. And throughout, I suppose, years of hard work and getting opportunities and strokes of luck and good casting opportunities and whatnot, I would say most dancers try to climb the ranks to become principal. And yeah, I suppose it means you are a leader of the company. You tend to do the featured work, so I suppose the pressure's on and whatnot. But yeah, it's like, I guess it's the kind of top pinnacle of the ballet company.
We'll get to that pressure in a minute.
Yeah.
I definitely want to talk about that.
Oh, it's there.
We're here, though, in part because of that upcoming production of Nijinsky, which is Feb 21 to March 1st at the Regent Theatre in Melbourne, and then April 4 to 22 at the Opera House in Sydney. But you've played this role before, right? Back in 2016. I understand it was one of your earliest principal roles, and I read that you were kind of terrified to step onto that stage at the time. Can you take us back to that moment and why you were so scared?
Yeah, it was so Nijinsky by John Neumeier. It was the first full-length principal role that I was given. Full-length meaning like an entire evening work. That year, I was in my second year in the ballet company, and I'd done some featured roles, but this was the first, like, you're doing the lead role of an entire 2-act ballet. So it was obviously very exciting, but a big opportunity and came with lots of stress. And yeah, I remember the first show, I wasn't necessarily supposed to go on for the Melbourne season. I was going to go on later in the year.
Okay.
In Sydney. And one of the other guys who was cast for Nijinsky broke his rib. He broke his rib before the show on a Wednesday and pushed through and did the show.
Wow.
And then, so that was a Wednesday, and then on Thursday I got the tap and it was like, you need to go on.
Oh my God.
On Saturday.
Yeah.
So I rehearsed that night, and then the next day did costume fittings, and then I was on Saturday matinee. And I was obviously excited, but yeah, you're right, I was terrified. And I remember I had a bunch of family came to the show on the Saturday, and the ballet opens in a kind of more theatrical way. When audience members come in to the auditorium, the curtain's already up, and what they see is like a ballroom on stage. And then Nijinsky's entrance, he's sort of wrapped in a big cloak, and I remember just telling myself like to try and calm down because I could see the cloak actually shaking. I was nervous.
Yeah.
And I had to walk down this like small flight of stairs, and my goal was just to get to the bottom of the stairs without falling over. So yeah, I was just sweating bullets. But then it turned out to be a great show, and it was a really great experience and opportunity for me.
Excellent. So Vaslav Nijinsky is, of course, a kind of beloved and tragic figure in ballet. What can you tell listeners about him as a kind of person and performer, and what you need to convey about him on stage through dance?
Well, I think what's so interesting about him as a character to play is that there's no actual footage of him dancing, so it's all kind of based on people's accounts of having watched him. And, it sounds like, and I do believe that he really was like the first great male ballet superstar. But because there's no footage, I think it lends itself to a sort of myth about him. And I think what's interesting about him is that as a performer, apparently he was just completely transformative and in a vast array of very different characters. He's famous for playing like the poet in Les Sylphides, the Spirit of the Rose, the Golden Slave, the Faun in Afternoon of a Faun. Lots of very different characters, but he would really become those people, some of them aren't people, on stage. And I think as a person, separately to that, he was very, it's tricky to describe, very, very intelligent, but I think very socially kind of naive and simple. And so I think there's these two kind of contrasts, is that the person on stage was very, very alive and would transform, but then him as a man, as a person, was sort of this very pure, naive, not exactly the charismatic man about town that would sort of happen on stage, but so these two kind of polar opposites. And
he was undiagnosed schizophrenic.
And then as he got later into life, actually when he was like late 20s, he was diagnosed schizophrenic in Switzerland. Yeah, which is just, tragic. He was this sort of tortured artist, and he gave his final performance when he was 29 years old, and then spent the next 30 years of his life in institutions. Yeah, so it really was a real fall from grace. But it lends itself to a really interesting and deep character to play on stage.
Okay, that's his backstory. Let's zoom back into yours now. You were a sporty kid, but started dancing when you were 7. How did that happen? How did you get enrolled?
I always, without realizing it, I liked dancing, and I think I had a natural knack for dancing. And it was Michael Jackson was the instigator. Like I think there was this TV special on, and I was sort of just transfixed to the television. And I think Dad recorded it, and so I would watch it over and over. Because I still remember just watching how this guy could dance. And so I sort of started to try and learn and copy the moves. And I think Mum and Dad were like, oh, wow, okay, Cal can move. And then a teacher at school, when, you must do like end of year kind of school concerts.
Sure.
And you learn really basic choreography. I think that teacher was like, oh, your son can dance and you should put him in dance lessons. And so Mum enrolled me in tap lessons, and I was furious. I did not want to do dancing. I had my idea of who I was, and that was going against that. And I think I was just like I was worried about being bullied at school.
Sure.
But Mum convinced me, do a year and then you can stop, and then you've tried it.
Sure.
So I did a year, and I was okay with it. It wasn't like I loved it. But it was at the end of that year that I was on stage for the first time, and it just like completely hooked me.
Oh, what was it about being on stage?
I just remember, it's hard to put into words. It's just like a real feeling, or like, I don't know, something chemical. I'm not sure, but I remember being in the wings waiting before our entrance to go on, and I was just so excited.
Yeah.
And it was such a rush. And then we did the show and everything around it too. Like I remember just the environment of being around your friends like backstage, and how fun and exciting that was. And that's still the case. Like, we do these amazing, great, scary things on stage, but I dance in the Australian Ballet with people I've been at school with since I was 12. So it's like, my best friends and my family. And I think it's the same of when I was 7. It was like, the excitement and the nerves of being on stage and dancing, but also just like hanging out with your friends.
Right.
And you get such a high from it. And I remember after the show, Mum coming backstage and was like, great, you've done your year. And I was like, and I want to come back next year. And it just sort of kept rolling from there.
And you did, as you say, you started with tap and then you did things like modern dance, hip hop. But there was this point where kind of ballet was a bridge too far, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I can't make that step.
Yeah.
Not doing that.
Yeah. I had this idea in my head, like, that I'd be wearing like a tutu or something if they'd roll me in ballet. And it just seemed like a step too far at that age for me,
12.
Yeah, I was 11, I think. And, I was in Ballarat and it just, I don't know, it seemed quite scary to me.
Country town.
Yeah. Even though I was pretty lucky, like I never copped anything for dancing, and so many people I work with now had it really rough.
Yep.
Growing up doing dance, no matter what city they were in. And yeah, so I was like, okay, everything but ballet. And then my teachers were like, you really should do ballet. Like it's good to have a technique. It'll help everything else. And I was really against it. And then I actually only found this out recently, but my eldest brother was the one I think who had a lot of convincing on me, because he was just like, Cal, like they're offering you like free lessons for 6 months. Like just try it. Try it, and then you can say you tried it. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe hearing my older brother, kind of be encouraging about it. And so I tried it, and then I was hooked. Yeah, loved it.
Yeah,
loved it.
And we're all the better for it. How quickly did it become a sort of a massive commitment in your life? Like I understand by the time you were 12, you were sort of catching a train, a V-line train by yourself to Melbourne to go to ballet school, and your mum's working nights to pay for these classes.
It became a big thing within like months. Yeah, I had a teacher. I don't know exactly why I loved it so much. I think, because how I think about it now is different to how I was when I was 11. But I think there was something about that sort of, pursuit of maybe perfection, and I liked how focused, one needed to be, and I was a very sort of serious kid, and I took things really seriously, and ballet sort of seemed to lend itself to that. And I think also too, it helps that if you have a bit of natural talent for something, or you have a teacher that's encouraging you and saying, hey, you're great at this, like that's good at any age. I think when you're a kid, it's like, oh, am I? Do I? Can I? Like,
yeah.
And so, yeah, it got sort of started pretty quick. And yeah, within 6 months, my teachers were like, if you want to do this, like you can. But if, you need proper or full-time training, and you should consider auditioning for these schools. And there was schools in Melbourne, the Australian Ballet School, which I ended up going to, or the Victorian College of the Arts Secondary School. And so I auditioned for the both of them. And the plan was to go to the College of the Arts because you could do your high schooling, your academic work there as well, and other styles of dance.
Yep.
And that just seemed like a kind of more well-rounded option. So I went to my teacher convinced me to do the Australian Ballet School audition as a sort of like audition for the audition, like a practice audition.
Sure. Yeah.
And I went down there, and I remember as soon as I walked in, I was like, oh, yeah, no, this is the place.
Yeah.
I just sort of felt it. And I got in, I was accepted into both schools. And then I remember still the plan was to go to the College of the Arts, but I had this like kind of feeling in my stomach. I was like, no, it's not right. And then I think when both the letters came, Mum was like, which one do you want to go to? And I was like, I want to go to the Australian Ballet School.
Yeah.
And so we ended up going with that. And that meant, the next year, started year 7, I would do a few hours of school at St. Pat's in Ballarat till midday, leave, get on the train, go down and do 3 hours of ballet each night. I did that for a year. And then the next year I went into full-time training. So I would get up at 5:30, be on the train by 6:30, catch the train down to Melbourne, and then do ballet and school all day. And
wow.
Yeah, and so I did that until I was almost 15, and then I moved down to Melbourne.
Full on.
Yeah.
Okay. What were the boys at St Pat's like? That's a famous football school,
Yeah.
kind of production line for AFL players.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, you mentioned you didn't have it really hard as a kid, but how did they react to a gun ballet dancer in their midst?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty apprehensive and pretty scared to be going to St Pat's, and it's a pretty bold choice, I think, to be sending your son there when they're all boys school, as you said, which has such a reputation for producing great AFL players, and I was like the one ballet dancer in the school, but everyone was great, really supportive, and I think though that the school was already aware, like prior to me coming, that it could be it very well maybe disastrous for me.
Okay.
And so I think the head of Year 7, I think, spoke to all the Year 7 students, like maybe before I arrived, maybe I was at something down in Melbourne for the ballet, and they said, I think he said, like, we have this student coming and kind of just said, has a lot of talent and a lot of potential, and it's ballet, and I think he basically said, don't give him a hard time.
Nice.
And then I think no one did. No one gave me a hard time.
It's that simple, principles, if you're out there listening.
Yeah, I think
apparently.
I think they were like, oh, this person is leaving school each day at midday. That's cool. Like, I think every Year 7 student wants to leave at lunchtime.
Right.
So it's just like, to follow this talent and that he has. So maybe maybe I got it off easy because it was like aspiring to something, which is great, but also sometimes feels like a bit of a cop-out because it's like, oh, well, would it have been different if I did ballet as a hobby, as in after school in Ballarat, But we can't know. So, yeah, I was lucky. I was very lucky.
You eventually graduated Dux with honours, but I understand your father passed away that final year in ballet school when you were just 18. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit about him and sort of the impact of that?
Yeah. My dad passed away in my final year at the ballet school, in that first term holiday break. And yeah, it was my final year, and the final year of ballet school is it's kind of like a long audition to join the Australian Ballet or to prepare yourself to go out to the world and find a job in a ballet company. And I had some big roles coming up, and I came home one evening and he had an aneurysm, a brain aneurysm, very out of the blue, and passed away. And he was it was a shock because he hadn't really had any health scares. It was very out of the blue.
What did he do?
He did lots of things. When I was growing up, he was a bricklayer, and then he was in the army, and then after the army, I believe he went back to bricklaying, and then I think at the time though, when I was a bit older, when he passed away, he was my uncle operates a safety eyewear manufacturing business, and my dad was managing the warehouse. Yeah, so not dancing. He didn't dance.
I was going to say a brickie and a grunt, and he was encouraging of his ballet dancing son, I take it?
Yeah, he was very musical. He loved music.
Okay.
And he had a beautiful singing voice, and he could play guitar, and that was a real passion of his. So I think he was always very encouraging of my brother and I to pursue whatever it was that we were interested in or passionate about.
Yep.
Because maybe he had his passion and interests, but the jobs didn't necessarily reflect that.
Yep.
Yeah, so whenever it was like, if you want to do ballet, great, do ballet. Like, if you want to play footy, great, play footy, and as soon as you don't want to play, don't play. Like, which was very freeing, and, I can reflect on that and see how lucky I was. But I had the good mix of it with Mum, because Mum was very much like the, consistent, stoic, hard worker. She was a nurse. As you said, she worked night shifts for me to go through the extra dance lessons I needed. So she was preaching of work ethic.
Sure.
And so, you know, sometimes Dad would be like, you don't want to do your homework? Don't do it. Don't worry about it. And she'd be like, do your bloody homework. Like, so we had, you know, kind of the angel and the devil. But yeah, no, final year of ballet school, Dad passed away. Was a real curveball, sort of knocked the whole family out, but maybe is selfishly the wrong word. Like, I think pretty selfishly, I was like, wow, this has happened, but I'm not going to let it derail what I've put in, you know, the last 5-6 years of work for. And I remember just thinking, like, you know, I'm going to get through this, but I'm not going to leave my studies and my goals, and if anything, I'm going to try and use it as further propulsion to try and achieve those dreams. And so, which is kind of what I did. I just got back to school like a week later and just buckled down and just like worked, which I think at that age, people go like, wow, like that's, you know, amazing. That's so brave. And I guess it was, but at the same time, like I think I just really put it away and didn't really address it too well. And then until like, you know, years later. But I think that's just how blinding my ambition was, and to sort of to get on with it, and to really like, you know, I remember thinking like, you know, I'm going to get, you know, I think I said it to my dad actually. He wasn't exactly conscious, but when he was in the hospital, and I remember saying like promising, I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to become a dancer with the Australian Ballet, and I'm going to get to principal. I'm going to do it. And I think almost saying that out loud, it sounds kind of crazy and a bit insane now, but I think it really helped me, like, I don't know, stick to my guns and try and pursue it. Yeah.
And you did exactly that. You became a full-time dancer the following year in 2015. Give us a sense of what that's like. I think I read that your schedule can include like 12 hours of class, 20 hours of rehearsal, 10 hours at the gym every week. Like, is that about right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, we start ballet class at 10:30, so it's a pretty late start considering, you know, most jobs start at 9. But people are usually, you know, in the gym for an hour before ballet class, so they're getting in there extra. And everyone's different, you know. Some people like to do strength training. People like to do cardio, some Pilates, some yoga. And it really, you know, for me, it sort of varied over the years depending on what roles are coming up or what I want to improve on. Or some days I've, you know, just like fallen off the wagon and not done any gym. But, you know, at the moment, my schedule, for example, is I like to be in the gym an hour before class, you know, sorting out the sore parts of my body and, you know, strengthening certain parts that I think will benefit in the upcoming shows. And then from midday after ballet class, we rehearse from 12 to 6:30 with an hour lunch break in the middle and then 2 15-minute breaks, like kind of in between. So it's not much break time, but, and rehearsals are just like full on, you know, you're learning the material of the upcoming shows, and then as you get closer to the shows, you're running it, you're running scenes, you're running specific dances, and it's a mix of solo work and partnering work and group work, and so it's physical, but it's also like a brain workout as well. Like sometimes when it gets to that 5 o'clock moment, even if you're not physically exhausted, your brain's like, I can't retain any more choreography. I can't learn any more steps.
The juice is gone.
Everything's gone. And you're hoping for like a 15-minute break so you can have a snack and just like lay down. And then at the moment, because the show opens so soon, I find myself even after rehearsals going back into the gym sometimes after 6:30 to kind of tick off some of the exercises I may have missed in the morning and, you know, do something for my knees if they're sore or my back. And so it's long and full days.
Play through pain.
Yeah,
through injury.
We love it.
We mentioned pressure and the mental pain, and again, I've heard you speak before about an experience playing Romeo, a role that you had dreamed about, yet kind of finding yourself in tears. Was this in the middle of a performance, or you had just finished? But whatever it was, it spurred you to start working with a psychologist after that. Can you tell us about that moment and what you got out of working with a professional?
Yeah, I'd been promoted to principal artist, say 6 months before that moment. And I felt like in those first 6 months, I was like riding high on the success and like, you know, the achievement. And I was like, oh, this is great. Everything's great. I feel good. I feel confident. And then we got to this ballet, Romeo and Juliet, which I had been dreaming of dancing since I was about 15 or 16. And yeah, as I've said before, I just hated it. I got out there and I hated it because I wasn't dancing it how I wanted to dance it.
Right.
It wasn't that like, oh, I realized I don't like this ballet. I still loved the ballet, but I couldn't take the pressure that I was ultimately putting on myself. You know, I was the newest principal in the company. I was doing opening night, and I just felt like the nerves got to me, and I wasn't delivering what I'd been rehearsing, and it was just my brain getting in the way, you know? Because sometimes you can go out there and you can fumble a step and it's like, oh, that's fine.
Sure.
I fumbled a step. Like, but I know what happened. But it gets scary when you get out there and you start and things start going wrong and you don't know why they're going wrong because you can't pinpoint what you did physically differently. It's just your brain and your nerves are creating tension, or in my case, like for those shows, I was sort of freezing up in a way, and yeah, it just sort of snowballed, and I'm sure it felt worse than it actually ever looked, you know. But it just made me so fearful of going out on stage and doing this role. And as it got to the end I did like 2 seasons. I did Melbourne and Sydney, and I got to the second last show in Sydney, and it was just like, it's like I'd reached like a breaking point, and I was just in tears, bawling my eyes out after the show in my dressing room. And my director, was shocked. My director was shocked. He was like, I can't. Why? He didn't know why I was so upset, because I think to him it was like, yeah, you're having a couple of technical difficulties, but it's okay. And I was like, no, it's like, I was like, please, like, pull me off the stage. Like, I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And then, the following year I came back and we'd had like a few months off of performing, and I was doing another show, and I kind of had forgotten about that experience. You know, I hadn't necessarily addressed it. I'd just forgotten about it. And then it was like feeling good in rehearsals, and I got out for the first show in Don Quixote doing Esparta, and I had to do a similar step to the ones that I was struggling with, and I just got back into that same place. I just freaked out.
Shit.
And I was like, fuck. And I remember for the rest of that season, I went from suddenly being calm as I was like the week before in the rehearsal period to just like that same nervous tension that I'd had during Romeo. And I remember thinking, like, you know, at that stage I was 27. And I was like, if this is what it's going to be like for the next 10 years of my career, like, I can't do it. Like, it's too hard, and the reward isn't enough. Like, so I need to try and find some strategies and some techniques to actually get through it. And so I started seeing a psychologist who the Australian Ballet found for me, and it completely changed everything. Just when you can explain to someone, you know, be it performance related or any other parts of your life, you know, I see a different therapist now for, you know, it's not that I've got separate therapists for separate things, but I'm seeing a different therapist now. But like in that stage, it was the first time I'd really seen a therapist, and it was strictly about what I was feeling at work, you know, even though it's all connected. But just to be able to say to someone what you're feeling and experiencing, and then have her turn to me and be like, yeah, of course you're feeling this, because like when you're in this situation and you're on stage, and it's like, it's extremely validating to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not crazy or I'm not weak. And from that, you know, we just worked on like actual tangible strategies that began to really help me. And they just completely, it took a little while over time, because I think that experience of being on stage and feeling that was it did have quite an effect on me. But yeah, the techniques that I learned, and, you know, still learning, just completely changed how I went out on stage and performed. And yeah, it was the best thing I could have done, because like I used to fantasize about like quitting and like working an office job, and which I don't think it would have lasted, but I was literally would say to my friends, like, maybe I should just do like a regular 9 to 5 and quit it all, because it was that scary and that uncomfortable.
Full on. Okay. From the brutal to the beautiful. My wife adores the elegance of the ballet. She's an American, grew up in a country town like way north of Manhattan, and the New York City Ballet used to come up there and do a kind of residence
wow.
in this country town in like a beautiful grassy amphitheatre. And she likes to say that the pitter-patter of feet when the dancers are out on stage is like her favourite sound in the world.
Wow, I love that.
What moment do you kind of most adore when you're out on stage dancing? Like, what is it about being on that floor, being in a flow state that appeals to you?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I've always been envious of people or dancers who say like, oh, you know, when I'm dancing on stage by myself, I get totally lost in the moment, because I don't know if I necessarily feel that. To be perfectly honest with you.
So what, it's more technical?
Well, it's like I'm thinking a lot, you know, like, and I'm jealous of people who are like, yeah, I wasn't thinking about anything, and like, but there's like, so it's difficult to say what my favorite moments are, but there's definitely I can think of some. Like, I remember when I did my first show of Nijinsky, because it was such, you know, I was 21, I was, you know, in the Court of Ballet. It was like a last minute kind of call in for the show in a way, and it was so overwhelming. And I remember there's a moment towards the end of the ballet before we do one last solo, and I'm just sitting on this chair, and I remember looking up and seeing this row of lights, you know, the stage lights. And that was a moment where I felt like incredibly present. And I remember thinking about my dad actually in that moment. And, you know, for whatever reason, you know, and so that's always stuck with me. And so it's moments like that and they're rarely that I'm dancing, because usually when I'm dancing, I'm thinking too much, or I'm seeing where I am in the space, or I'm probably bloody scared that some step's going to go wrong or something. But so the moments that I really enjoy on stage are when you're out there and you're able to be on the stage and standing there and, you know, in front of thousands of people, but not doing much. So, which might sound like an easy cop-out, but that's when it feels like quite powerful. And, you know, and be it if you're in a character, or, you know, that's when I feel really present and like that I'm sort of maybe, I don't know, not commanding something, but yeah, it does feel very empowering. And so yeah, it's always the quiet moments, be it sitting in a chair or just walking across a stage, or
you're stopping to smell the roses.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. That's when I feel, really, really in the moment.
Wonderful. I'm wondering now about the lifespan of a ballet dancer, because I've got no idea. You're 29. How much longer can you do what you do?
It's running out, mate. It's running out. I think it's different for everyone, but I'd say probably on average, like mid to late 30s. So, you know, some dancers dance to their early 40s. I think it's a mix of like how long the body can hold out, how long the passion holds out, or another passion takes over, or, you know.
How's the body? How's the
body
passion?
is okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're about to open Nijinsky, and so I'm covered in bruises because it's one of those very physical ones. But for the most part, I've been really lucky. Like in terms of injuries, I've had little injuries along the way, but nothing too serious to keep me out for a long time. Yeah, so I'm almost 30, which means that I should probably start to think about what I'm going to do next. And I have no idea. And so if you've got any ideas, you can let me know. Because I think I've probably got another maybe 6 or 7 years left
I was going to ask you what was next. Do you see yourself as an artistic director, as a choreographer, as a teacher, or something altogether different? Do you get out of ballet and into a different kind of dance?
Mate, I don't know. Like, I'm not a choreographer, because I think that's like a lot of things. I think choreography is a real calling, and, you know, I haven't necessarily had that desire or that, you know, inspiration to start creating. I mean, sometimes, like when I was younger, the idea of being an artistic director seemed amazing. But as I've gotten older and seen more about the job, like it's a really bloody hard job. Of course it is. And, So sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe when I'm finished dancing, maybe I'd like to do something different, separate to the world I've lived in since I was 12, because that's another crazy thing. Like it's really all, I consider myself, I try to be a well-rounded person, but like I've literally been in the same building since I was 12 years old. The Australian Ballet School is down the hall from the Australian Ballet Company, and I started going there when I was 12 in 2008, and now I'm 29.
You're institutionalized.
I'm institutionalized. I'm well and truly institutionalized. So then that's when I'm like, if I was to continue on in a different role after being a dancer, like I could be in that same building for like 50 years, and that seems crazy.
Or a life well spent.
Yeah, maybe I'll get like a plaque or something in the building. But yeah, I don't know. I oscillate between being like, oh, do I want to stay in the arts or do I want to do something different? I'm not sure. It's all up in the air. So yeah, I'm taking as many suggestions as possible.
Fantastic. Maybe our listeners will have some for us. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us, Callum. It was a pleasure to chat to you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
That was Callum Linnane, principal dancer for the Australian Ballet, in conversation with Good Weekend senior writer Konrad Marshall for the latest Good Weekend talks. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, rate and comment wherever you get your podcasts, and keep tuning in for more compelling conversations. Coming soon, we chat with American journalist and podcaster Kara Swisher about tech bros and Trump and where she finds solace and hope in troubled times. Good Weekend Talks is brought to you by the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, proud newsrooms powered by subscriptions. To support independent journalism, search Subscribe Sydney Morning Herald or The Age. This episode of Good Weekend Talks is produced by Konrad Marshall and edited by Josh Towers. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills, Tom McKendrick is head of audio, and Katrina Strickland is the editor of Good Weekend.